Jams, jams, jams. Picture books and jams. Welcome, everybody, to PBJamz. Music and picture books, what a perfect sandwich. Squish them all together, what a yummy snack. PBJamz, yummy books and music. PBJamz, reading, writing, teaching. PBJamz, what a yummy treat. Jamming PBs all the time. PBJamz.
Whenever it is that you are joining us for PBJamz, we are so excited that you are here today. And I'm super excited to welcome Lisa Rogers today. Thank you, Lisa, for being here.
Thank you so much, Tani. I'm thrilled to be here.
And Lisa has written, and we're going to be talking today about Beautiful Noise, the musical aspirations and all the quirky things and fun of John Cage. So if you're not familiar with John Cage, then you're in for a treat with Lisa's book, and this discussion is going to be a lot of fun. He was definitely an out-of-the-box musician. And so I'm excited to dig in and talk with you, Lisa. So let's give a little shout out to begin with. Beautiful Noise, the music of John Cage, written by Lisa and illustrated by, is it Il-Sung Na?
Il-Sung Na, yes.
Okay. And published by Ann Schwartz Books, which is an imprint of Random House Children's Division. Yes. So the art is spectacular. Lisa and I were talking a little bit before we came on officially, and it's just absolutely, it's spot on. It's just so beautiful. And I think such a great job of capturing the kind of quirkiness, but just beautiful. It's just really spectacular art.
It is. It's brilliant. When I received my copy of the book here, I was absolutely stunned by what Il-Sung Na did. I could not imagine what it would be like to illustrate a book about music. But what he did was, and I'll show you the end papers, he created this amazing glossary.
Love the end papers.
To go with the sound words that I used throughout the book. And then he used those images in each illustration. And they're just stunning. One of my favorite pages is the opening sequence. Well, I love everything about it, but the opening sequence really sets you up to realize that this is a very different book and you need to pay attention because it's stunning. So what if all the sounds you heard, garbage truck screeching, feet skipping, pigeons scattering, tires whispering, children giggling, balls bouncing, dog tags clinking, taxis vrooming, sounded to you like music. Then you'd be like John Cage. Look at what he did here. It's just incredible.
It is. It's absolutely amazing. Such detail. So, just so much detail. Really lovely.
And the vision for the book, how he came up with these ideas, I just have no idea, but it's gorgeously done, expertly done, brilliantly done, and I am so thrilled that he agreed to illustrate this book.
Yes.
He made it what it is.
And that's always, I think, how it is with picture books, right? The author brings these beautiful words, but they need the illustrations. We talk about all the time, leaving room for the illustrator, and that it is a marriage of words, and pictures of text and illustration, and it takes both.
Absolutely. And the art director said to me when she sent me this book, she said it's the perfect marriage of text and art. And I have to agree. I couldn't have hoped for anything more beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, talk to us about your inspiration. Like, where do you have some connections to? He is a little more obscure of a composer and musician, not one. I do remember learning about him from my music appreciation class way back in the 80s. Jeez. That sounds really old when you say it now, doesn't it? Jeez. But he's not one of the more well-known composers. So how did you come to know about him and want to write about him?
So somehow I knew about Cage's silent piece, in which he did compose the piece, but there are no notes on the page. And it's for 4 minutes and 33 seconds. The pianist sits at the piano and does not play a note. So I knew of that piece. And in 2015, I think I saw a photograph in the New York Times, John Cage listening very closely as he used a feather to stroke the spines of a cactus, and it was mic'd. And I thought, oh my goodness, I forgot about John Cage. I really need to find out what made him tick. What, how did he get to be who he was? And I delved into research immediately. And of course, there's so much to know about him. He was so talented in so many areas and he had so many interests. He was a mushroom expert. He made his own art. He created all different kinds of compositions and was constantly inventing new ways to make music. And I wrote about him, but it was more of a straight biography. And straight biographies are not really what's wanted right now in the market, something more inventive. And so it took years for me to come up with this manuscript that became Beautiful Noise. Before that, I wrote something just on the silent piece, which I thought was pretty good. It got rejected. And then years later, I wasn't even thinking about John Cage. And this is what is really magical, I think. I just woke up one morning, and even before I got out of bed, I had the text of this book in my mind. Unfortunately, I had paper and pencil right next to me. I scribbled it down. It's barely readable. And I put it together into a Word document, and I sent it to one of my critique partners. And I said, is this a story? Because it was so different. It's written in second person. It contains the elements of biography, but it is not written at all like a regular biography, like a typical biography. And I had no idea whether it would work or not. So she said, yes, it is. I fleshed it out a bit more. I sent it to my agent 2 days later. She loved it. We sent it to my editor, my first editor, 16 Words, the William Carlos Williams book right there. And she loved it. And she offered me a contract almost instantly. So,
wow.
Yeah. There was a lot of research that went into this book, which seems simple, but it is not simple at all. And one of my favorite pieces of research that I did was during one concert where John Cage was giving a concert with the New York Philharmonic. And he decided he was going to turn the musicians' instruments on and off. They were mic'd, and he would just intermittently turn them on and off, and they were not too happy with that. Being musicians, right?
I bet not. Yes.
But my editor had asked me if there were any women musicians in the Philharmonic, and there were very few. So I looked through the Philharmonic archival records, which fortunately were online. They were typed out right from this concert in the 50s. And I looked through the substitutes list for the dates of this concert. And indeed, on one of the dates of the concert, the 3 days of the concert, there was a female harpist. So I could say that the harpist plucked her harp.
Got you.
One word. It took quite a bit of research. So that's amazing. Just one example of the kind of
Yeah. But I think and the structure, I had written that down to talk about, because I do think it's such an inventive structure, especially for a biography. But you know what? And I don't think a biography about John Cage written in a traditional format would even work. Like, how do you talk about John Cage in a tradition? I mean, there was nothing traditional about him. So I love that you ended up with a different format. I think it's very, very appropriate.
Thank you. It would definitely do him a disservice if it were just ordinary. And it's
Yeah.
definitely not your ordinary picture book by
No, but I love the structure. I think it's very well suited, and I really enjoyed. It's like you're just discovering bits and pieces about him as you go, and you're making those comparisons to yourself as you go. You know, do I like this? Do I listen to this? Do I? And then at the end, I love how you end it. I was talking before we came on about what a great classroom book this is. And just beyond the idea of introducing kids to John Cage, which is phenomenal. I think for your quirky kids, especially, you know, like those kids that just, I just think this is perfect for them. Like the ones that don't feel like they fit. I mean, he didn't fit anywhere. He fit in like he was an absolute misfit, but we're still speaking his name and we're still talking about him, and his music is still controversial but respected in circles and talked about at least. So I think for your quirky kids, it's just really wonderful to introduce them to somebody like John Cage. But I love that you ended it with the listening.
Mm-hmm.
And as a teacher, you know, I mean, you've dealt with these young kids and you know what an important piece that is. And so to be able to introduce that to them in this way, as listening almost as an art instead of just a means to an end, like I just think that's spectacular.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. One thing I did with my students sometimes was we would just sit and listen to the sounds around us, and they would write poetry after that, make a list poem of all the sounds they heard. Because again, you can teach mindfulness, or you can just kind of open kids up to something like mindfulness and inventiveness, creativity. Yeah. And I always wanted to foster my students' creativity, thinking differently, taking chances in terms of their thinking, right? Growing them as people, as readers, as writers. And I wanted them to explore. So yeah, let's think a little different. Let's listen to the sounds around us and write something based on the sounds, or make our own music based on those sounds. And people do this. Like, people are successful doing this, and perhaps more successful if you're an inventive thinker. Yeah, the road might be harder, but might be more rewarding too.
Right. And you're being truer to yourself when you know, really dig deep and get to the heart and the core of who you are, and then you offer that up. I mean, there's just no greater gift than that you can give to the world as a creator. Yeah.
So it's so valuable, not always valued, but so important. And I think if people thought more carefully about creative endeavors and their importance, they would value them more.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. So you talked a little bit about your writing process. Can you clue us in a little bit more, maybe from how you went from that original traditional biography format into this? I mean, I know you talked about just kind of inspiration in the moment. Were there some other ways that you tried to rearrange it before that?
Yeah, I certainly, I did the tweaking that is not real revision, the cutting of text that it doesn't result in a new vision for the manuscript, at least not for me. I went for many runs and tried to think of how I could frame this so that it would be successful. And I think because I had immersed myself so much in the research to begin with, I had all this information and felt I had to present all this information. But of course, the book is about listening. And yeah, once I realized it was about listening, I tried to make it about listening. And I think that's perhaps when I focused just on 4 minutes, 33 seconds, but still I was telling a story that wasn't really my own. It was really the story that was out there about him. And I think once I internalized that this was about listening and how to present it to a child, what is the value of listening? And of course, we're listening all the time. It's sort of, when you think about reading and learning to read, right? There's this overwhelming sort of landscape of words, and how do you make sense of that? I remember my child going down the grocery aisle and reading every single package. What eventually you tune it out, and eventually you tune out sounds too. You just are focusing on certain ones. So somehow, one of the things that I do when I'm successful as a writer is meditate on my theme. And so I must have been meditating on the theme of listening. And that's when this came to me. What if you did this? What if you did that? Well, then you would be inventive too. What if you thought different? And that's how that happened. With 16 words, I was going on a overseas trip right after I read an article about the inspiration for that 16-word poem, The Red Wheelbarrow. And so I didn't have time to do a lot of research about William Carlos Williams. And immediately I knew that I wanted to structure that book about the relationship between Williams and the person who owned the wheelbarrow. So I had that structure in my mind, and I wrote to that because that theme was about connection, respect, caring for each other. This one, listening. Now, I did a lot of listening as a kid, so I think that might be why I connected so much to John Cage.
Yeah.
Not really sure. He grew up on the beach in California, and he listened for silence. There was none. And I grew up on the beach on the East Coast, and I clearly remember waiting for that wave action to quiet down and the water to go back down the beach, and it would sort of sizzle and hiss a little bit as it went down. And it was never silent, right? Never. There was never even a moment of silence. Right. And I think that might be why I connected with Cage so much, appreciating the sounds around me. I did a lot of that.
Yeah. Fascinating. That's really interesting. Very cool. Well, I mean, we've spent the musical connections are so intertwined. Like, I always ask that as a question, but I feel like we've been talking about that the whole entire time. You've talked about a couple of the concerts specifically that he did, and how he approached things. Is there something beyond that it's just so full of musical connections? I mean, we could talk for a long time about that, but is there any other key ideas about his music or the musicality of this manuscript that you want to point out and talk about?
Sure. Well, his music wasn't random. He truly composed even the bits that seemed random. He had a structure. And then within that structure, he was looking for random sounds that would make the composition. That's what 4 minutes, 33 seconds was about. Whatever was in the air at the moment became the composition, whatever the listeners heard. But there were many other pieces like that. And he used lots of different kinds of instruments, like a conch shell. He would put water in that and sort of gently tip it. And of course, those sounds are always going to be a bit different. They're never going to be, it's not like hitting the C on a piano, right? It is not the same sound twice. And he was always looking for new and inventive sounds, something he hadn't heard before. And he was actually influenced by art too, because he was friends with there's one of my favorite sounds, my hound dog howling. He was friends with the abstract artist Robert Rauschenberg, who created white paintings, white canvas, all white. And he began to think, what if I created a musical canvas with no sound except what happened in the air. So he collected sounds too. One of the pieces I mentioned in the author's note is one where he collected hundreds of sounds, city sounds, animal sounds, country sounds, people talking, and he taped them. So he used actually electronic tape, and he cut the tape into thousands of pieces and spliced it back together. And that was called the Williams mix. Now people do that all the time, right? That something like it all the time. So he was a true pioneer. I really admire him a lot. And he was also kind of fun. He was fun. He was brilliant and very charming as well. So I kind of feel like I got to know him a bit.
Yeah. that's always really special when we write about something and then we just feel it so intimately, like a friend, or, whether it's an experience or a person or a character. Yeah, it's always fun to kind of explore them very deeply, and then you feel like you have a friend in them. Yeah, that's fabulous. So interesting. He's such an interesting guy.
He is. And the thing that he felt was that if you accepted the sounds around you and thought of them as music, you would be happier.
Mm.
And he loved all sounds, but he didn't like sounds that were predictable. For example, the hum of the refrigerator, always the same, right? Static, doesn't change. That he said in one interview that I watched, he was trying to like that sound.
I like how you worked that into the text of the book. Yeah. I mean, I guess we all have, even it's interesting that even as much as he loved different sounds and sounds that would annoy other people probably, and he thought of them as music, it's interesting that he also had something that just grated him the wrong way. But I think we all have that. I worked at McDonald's for a summer, and the little alarm on the fry, when the fries are done, like that alarm, oh, I just can't. Yeah. So that would be mine.
And I think if you listen, you really do notice so much more. You really are opening your mind to new experiences and new thoughts, and it's really valuable thing to do. Maybe few moments of meditation before you jump out of bed and start your day would make some.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely think that whole listening and just, yeah, I love that idea. I think we probably should take more time for that. He was probably wise to teach us to listen a bit more. I know I could benefit from that. Yeah. Well, talk to us, Lisa, about what's coming next for you.
Well, I've been very, very fortunate. So I have a bunch of books coming out in the next couple of years. But I'm going to be presenting Beautiful Noise at the Boston Book Festival in October. And I'm really excited because I've attended the Boston Book Festival and never dreamed I would be presenting.
Oh, that's fabulous.
So this book comes out October 10th. And then I have a little golden book biography I'm so excited about. It is on President Ronald Reagan, coming out on Election Day this year. And I was asked to do another one about a musician, a very influential musician, which was so much fun to write. I really had a lovely time doing that. And I was singing this musician's songs all summer while I was working on the book. And my husband
Fun.
was like, okay, enough. But I love.
Yeah. Well, that sounds like another PBJamz visit coming up eventually. I would love that.
So in 2025, I have 2 more picture book biographies, one about a woman artist and her creative inspiration. And guess what? She always listened to music while she painted. It's
nice.
Her creativity.
Yeah.
And the other one is Woody's Words. It is about Wilson Rawls, the author of the classic Where the Red Fern Grows.
Oh.
Boy and his dogs, his hound dogs.
Mm-hmm.
And like Cage, he persevered against enormous odds to do what he wanted and needed to do, which was to become a published author. And that really struck a chord with me. When I learned that he had no education, he had very little access to books, but somehow there was something in him that just made him want to write. And then he wrote this beautiful book that is still read today.
Yeah.
1961. It's still read today.
That's amazing. That's the dream we all aspire to, right? That our words are going to live on, more than just a few years. It's amazing. I didn't realize that he didn't have a lot of education, or that's just fascinating.
Almost none, but he just had that drive. And, like Cage, a drive to do something out of the box. Yeah.
That goes a very long way. And it keeps people motivated. I mean, when it's such a deep-seated desire, we talk about in your librarian work, we talk about these kids that they struggle to read, but then they want to read these things that are so much higher for, than what their reading level is, but they can be successful just because they want that information, they want that experience, they want that knowledge. And so that motivation that comes from deep inside, that'll carry you a long way beyond what you think you're capable of or what others think you're capable of.
Exactly. Right. The sky's the limit. And if someone limits you or tries to keep you from doing what you want to do, that can be very hard on a child, because they'll think that they'll be discouraged, right? And you don't
Right.
want to discourage a child from doing what they want to do, what they're meant to do. And to think that, Cage's father was an inventor, right? So I'm sure he was not happy when John Cage decided not to continue college and become a composer. But and he did struggle. He struggled financially. He worked so hard to reach his goal. And again, he persevered. And perseverance really takes you a long way. And
It does.
and now anytime I read an article about experimental music in the New York Times or wherever, he is always mentioned.
Oh, yeah.
And he died in 1992. So his influence is long lasting.
Yeah. I was saying before, talking in my classroom this year about musical superheroes. And like, that's one of the things that we're talking about. And I'm trying to approach it with my students that, we're learning from these people what we can do to leave a legacy and to be a hero in our own communities and in our own, sphere of influence. And even though you're kindergarten through second graders, like you can learn, and we're also juxtaposing like the superheroes like Hulk and Batman and Superman, and we're having a lot of fun with that music. And we're saying, what can we learn from this superhero? But then here's Mr. Rogers, or here's John Cage, or here's Dolly Parton, or Rosetta Tharpe, or, BB King. And what can we learn from them? And so I'm hoping that some of these things that we're talking about, that perseverance, that willingness to be different, and that's a good thing. It's not, so often it's viewed as a negative thing in our organized areas of life, church and school and community and, clubs and whatever. Like, the difference is frowned upon, but those are the ones that leave the legacy, right? The ones that are doing what everyone else is doing, those are not the ones that are going to leave the legacy. It's the people that are willing to move beyond what's expected and what's anticipated, and to be able to think outside of that. Those are the ones that are going to be leaving that phenomenal legacy that's going to be mentioned, even though, and so often it's the case, right? Like artists, either visual artists or musical artists or authors that are not appreciated in their own time, and they live a life of poverty and often die a death of poverty. But later on, when they're not even here to know, the legacy, floats to the surface.
Exactly. Yeah, it can be very difficult. John Cage was bullied as a child.
Yeah.
He knew what he wanted to do. He just was so convinced that he was meant to do what he did, to experiment with music and create music that no one had heard before. He really thought different, and he valued it. So he knew its value. He struggled, but he was successful. So I think, I always wonder, like, one of the reasons I think I'm interested in biography was I always wondered, how do people get to do what they do? How does it happen that you become successful? And what are the steps? And so I hope that with Beautiful Noise, young readers can see it's just step by step by step. And thinking different is a really big part of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Think different. And it is hard with peer pressure and a typical environment to do something different. But I think it's pretty clear now with that creative arts are valuable. I hope it's clear now.
Yeah, they're so important. They reach children at a play. I'm not just children. That's my sphere of so that's where my head goes immediately. But those creative endeavors are what keep us sane and what keep us, motivated and growing.
Absolutely. A visit to an art museum, concert, anything like that will broaden your experience, make you appreciate things, and also give a lot of pleasure.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
it's important.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. This has been such a fun conversation about John Cage and this beautiful book called Beautiful Noise. And for my viewers and listeners, let me just remind you, first off, let me say that Lisa is generously giving a giveaway of the winner's choice of either a picture book critique if you're an author, or if you're a teacher and you'd like for her to zoom in and read her book and talk about that, then she'd love to do that for a teacher. So you'll have your choice of those two if you are the winner. And in order to get your name in the hat, all you need to do is leave a comment on the blog. If you're watching the video on YouTube, make sure you go to the link in the description, go to the blog and leave a comment there if you'd like to be entered into the contest within the next 2 weeks. So I'll put that date on the blog as well for when you need to leave the comment. But that generous giveaway is waiting. And also, let me remind you that in order to support authors, you don't have to spend a dime. Of course, we want you to buy this book, and it is absolutely stunning and beautiful, and it's just so pretty to look at, and the words are so amazing and wonderful. And Lisa's right, and her editor was right. It's the perfect marriage of text and art. So you're going to want to buy it. But even if you can't afford, I can't afford to buy all the books I want to buy either. So if you can't afford to buy it, for sure, check it out at the library, put in a request if they don't have it. Leave reviews if you can. Amazon, Goodreads, Barnes and Noble are great places to leave those reviews. Share it with a friend. If you have a musician friend, or you have a friend with a quirky kid that has just an unusual outlook on life, if you know of somebody that may appreciate something about this book, just share it with them. Tell them about it. I do this all the time. Shout it out on social media. Say, I just read this cool book. Or, I read this aloud to my students if you're a teacher, and just shout that out and let people know what's great about the books that you're reading, and especially about Lisa's book, Beautiful Noise. Such an amazing composer, and just such a great and unique take on it, which is so perfect for John Cage. So check that out if you haven't. Down below, I'm going to link up all Lisa's resources. So where you can find her on socials, her website, where you can buy the book, all those things. But also I'm going to link up below some music that connects with this book. I'm going to link up some teacher activities, some writing prompts. Lisa's going to share some writer tips with you. So check out all that below on the blog. If you're watching on YouTube, go check that out at the blog. And just support her and support all the authors that are putting out this fabulous content that's integrating music and art and just all these beautiful things that make our life richer and more wonderful. So thank you, Lisa, again for being here. It's been wonderful.
Thank you so much, Tani. It's been fantastic. Everybody, go make some beautiful noise.
Absolutely. Yes, definitely. All right, guys, we'll see you next time on PBJamz. Bye.
PBJamz, what a yummy treat. Jamming PBs all the time. PBJamz, jams, jams, jams. Picture books and jams. We'll see you next time for PBJamz.